For this parable, we're going back to the 1830s. At the time, a British ship entered a port in South Asia. Just hold on, you'll get where I'm heading with this. The British ship arrived to collect the nominal tax. The area where the British East India Company was operative, all the farmers that lived in that jurisdiction had to pay a tiny amount of tax. It wasn't that much, it was like 5% of their income. And the communities that lived over there under the jurisdiction of the British East India Company thought, you know what, the British Navy arranges that we can trade here freely without any pirates affecting us. They keep the Portuguese in line, so the Portuguese won't expand too much into our territory. The same with the Danish and the French. Also, because the British Navy is present, many robbers by land are frightened of repercussions by the British. So you know what? There are some advantages, so why not just pay the 5% tax? It won't harm us. So the British ship arrived to collect the tax of one district. And when the tax came in, converted into pounds, it was like 50,000 pounds. And pounds, sterlings back then were much more than now. It was paid in silver, and in some cases in gold. But this is what happened. The money went to the treasury of the British East India Company. 2 months later, it was harvest time. The farmers want to sell their crops. And not only that, there were also merchants from India, from that part of India, to sell their products. So the British purchased most of the products. There were traders from Britain that came over there to purchase it from them. But here's the catch. The traders paid the farmers and the merchants out of the treasury of the British East India Company. And the treasury had their income from the taxes that came in. So actually it's the money that those Indian farmers paid to the British, that same money they received back in payment for their goods and services. Well, not that much services, but you get what I'm saying here. So that ship that ended South Asia 2 months earlier now left with a lot of cargo towards Britain. And similar things happened all around South Asia. Now what's going on here? The locals pay a tax because they think we have benefits with the British being here. But it's that same money that's used to pay for their export. So are they being paid for their export? They're not. So the British are really taking away their resources for free. The British didn't send Marines with guns into the mainland and put guns to people's heads or rifles and said to them, hand over your harvest, hand over your goods, or else people are going to die. The British didn't do it like that. The British came and offered some benefits. And some of those benefits were real, indeed. There were pirates active over there. They didn't dare to be active there anymore because the British were there. But that was the only advantage. Okay? But this advantage was perceived of such high value by the people that thought, you know what, just 5% tax, we can do that. But that 5% tax was a lot of money. And the British used that same money to purchase from the locals. So the money kept circulating in the community, while the resources went away. So that's how they drained South Asia of their resources every year, and the locals were not aware of it. They thought, we're being paid. But here's the thing. If the same British guy that collected the taxes would also come and purchase the goods, or say would purchase the harvest, the goods, or whatever, then people would realize, hold on a minute, aren't you the same guy that came and collected tax from us? How come you're also purchasing our goods? This doesn't add up. So the British had one guy that went out and collected tax, and then they had other guys from the same cult that so-called came all the way from Britain that came. They dressed like British men from Europe. They spoke with a high accent also. And they came by, so-called, inspecting the goods and purchased them. It was a scam. And this went on for generation after generation. There's an article. You can read it on Al Jazeera. Now, of course, there's going to be reviews about it. And I don't say you have to give in to everything that's written in that article. But an investigator, I'm saying a researcher from India, went through the economics of South Asia under British rule. And later, around the 1850s, they made it into an empire. So they united the kingdoms and principalities in South Asia under the British throne as a British Raj, or the Empire of India. So even before India, South Asia became an empire, the British were dominant over there. The British East India Company dissolved, and later you had the Empire of India, which lasted till 1947. This researcher found out that around $20 trillion, he counted it in dollars. In euros, that would be around, today around maybe 16 to 18 trillion euros. But it's a lot of money. That amount of money the British drained from South Asia within 200 years. And while the draining was going on, the money, which was real silver and real gold, that they withdrew from South Asia, was spent on Canada, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa. It was spent on the autonomous kingdoms of the British Empire. And not only the silver, gold, not only the physical money, and the physical currency, I mean, also the resources that were purchased from them, was spent on the other dominions, as the British call it, those autonomous kingdoms. They used the resources of South Asia to finance wars against Imperial China, to construct roads, railways, and the dominions or the autonomous kingdoms. They used it to spend on their navy. They also used it for their exports to Europe. So the British Empire was really a big hoax economy in which South Asia was the main region they drained, but also did it with place in Africa. But here's the thing. Where did all that wealth go? Where did all that money go? It was wasted. And a big portion was kept in the pockets of the pagan rulers of this world. Meanwhile, they introduced this fake currency, which is just paper printed with some press. And people imagine that that's value. Well, it has no value. That's what we use worldwide today. So real wealth has been drained from multiple parts of the world, and now people depend on fake wealth. And now the fake wealth has become faker because it's virtual, just numbers on the screen. Now, I'm not discussing colonialism here, nor imperialism, because there were benefits that the British gave to South Asia indeed. So Britain had to invest a lot in South Asia to keep this thing going. So it cost them something. Okay? So I'm not going into the debate of whether it was good, bad, and all of that. No. I'm just pointing out the facts here. South Asia was drained. as many parts of Africa, to build New Zealand, Australia, Canada, South Africa was also an autonomous kingdom. So when you look at it carefully, the South Asians were robbed, but they didn't realize they were being robbed. That's why in 1947, when the Empire of India separated from the British throne, man, it went backwards. And for generations after their independence, there was a lot of poverty, a lot of internal struggles, and a lot of economic and financial hardship. While they were under the British throne, there was a booming economy. But that booming economy was a bubble. A bubble that was kept alive by London, by the lords in London. So when they separated from Britain, that bubble bursted. And when that bubble bursted, because there was no British Empire anymore to compensate the theft, man, it's then that they saw what was happening to them. Now, I've taken 11 minutes to give this parable. This is not really a parable, okay? In the beginning of this video, that was a parable, okay? But the rest that I told about history, that's factual, okay? Now, I'm not here to give an historical discussion, but I'm using this economics of the former British Empire to explain to you how Satan operates. Because remember, the rulers of the former British Empire, they were Apollonists. As well as the ones that rule Britain now, they are Apollonists. Their descendants, world's Apollonists, are ruling Britain. Okay? Those Apollonists learned their craft from Apollo, who is Satan's heir. Okay? So they copy what their father, Satan, is doing. And they have their older brother, Apollo, who is big brother, whom they follow. Because Satan demands them to follow and honor big brother, who's Apollo. So those Apollonists, they put in practice what their father figure is doing. Okay? So how does Satan drain masses of people without them being aware of it? First, he comes with a threat, with an issue. And an issue can be factual. And when people are faced with an issue, they want to get rid of it. They want to do something about it. They want relief from it. Then Satan intensifies the issue. And then people get fed up. Now people get into dysfunction. Now there are fights. Now there's violence. Now people really want something to be done about it. And then you have the saviors that arrive, who present themselves as uninterested, but they so-called claim to have a solution. And when people hear this solution, they think, oh, we want this. We want this to be over with. But the people are told, you need to cooperate with the solution. And people think, of course we're going to cooperate with this solution. Come on, we want this violence, this chaos to stop. So they begin to comply with the solution. And in the beginning, the compliance doesn't cost them much. And that's where the enemy traps them. While they're complying, they get relief. And in that relief, demons give them more compensation. Other psychic benefits, like you're someone, they trick you by using your need for significance, which is a natural human need. But you get a compensation. While the compensation is there, you keep complying. After you forget that you're complying with something. And it's during this compliance that the enemy takes things away from you. Your health, long life, the quality of your family, the quality of the community. So that's how the enemy drains you. And you're not aware of it. Because things are working externally. That's why there's a saying, not everything that glitters is gold. And that's something you need to learn. That's something that needs to get through to you. Look, it comes down to this. Satan never offers you something without taking something much bigger away from you. Remember, he's a thief. He is broke. Let me say like this. Satan, our enemy, is broke. He has nothing. All that he had, he lost, and he was banned from the heavens. Okay? He is broke. And those other demonic entities, that the masses of demonic entities that followed him were also banned from the heavens, they are broke also. And the Nephilim entities that some of those demonic entities brought forward with earthly women and with animals, those Nephilim entities are broke also. So they are broke. Being broke and realize how broke they are parasites they need to feed off of us, the human population. So they need to colonize the human population to have their rule, to have their empire. Okay? And to accomplish this, they have the shadow government, which is their institution on the earth that enacts their rule on their behalf. But still you have the masses. The 99.9% of human population needs to get along with it. And the only way you can get the 99.9% of population to get along with it is by tricking them into thinking that there is a benefit for them. While that benefit is not really a benefit at all. That benefit is just a smokescreen for the theft that's going on. Think about the exploitative politics of the British Empire. By the way, it wasn't only the British Empire that had this tactic, okay? But the British Empire perfected it quite well. The British had to invest in the places they went to. They had to give some benefit for the thing to keep working. And here's the thing, it was only South Asia. The autonomous kingdoms, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, all those autonomous kingdoms that Britain established, they were populated by a lot of white folks, British colonists, okay? And those places became autonomous as separate kingdoms, but under the British throne. The British copied what the Spanish did in the Spanish Empire. So they weren't that unique at all, okay? They pretended to be, but they were not. They copied it from the Spanish. The Spanish did a far better job, but the Spanish really invested a lot in their autonomous kingdoms overseas, and it often cost Spain a lot because Spain was often broke. Britain, on the other hand, copied Spain, but they did it the other way around. They made sure that the place they went to became broke. Even their own white folks overseas, they had to be broke while they thought they were winning. And the idea of white supremacy or racism was pushed on the white population overseas in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, all those other places, so that they would have some psychic relief, mental relief, so they wouldn't see or notice that they were being drained also. Because the Apollonists that run the British Empire, they didn't just drain South Asia. They drained their own white population also, both in Britain and overseas. And here's the thing, the white folks overseas and the autonomous kingdoms, they were often treated as a third-degree citizen in compared to whites that were born in Britain itself. Because the whites overseas were often not allowed to be involved in the foreign politics, not even that much in the foreign trade. So even they, even though they were so-called white, they also were trade. And it took a long time before they realized they were being trained. Okay? The myth of white supremacy was to make those people feel special, and by them having this compensation, feeling special, they were blind from seeing that they were being exploited also. They had to work hard, because remember, Britain invested. They took wealth away from South Asia and invested in autonomous kingdoms. But who were the ones that had to work to keep it all going? The white folks, the British colonists, right? So the British colonists had to work very hard, also to build the roads, to build the towns and all of that. Yes, there were immigrants from South Asia that Britain used, but overall, those white folks had to do it on their own. They had to keep the autonomous kingdoms going. But they weren't paid in full. They only received a small compensation. But they complied because they were trained to think they were special, belonged to the British Empire. So after the British Empire collapsed, because that thing had to collapse sooner or later, that couldn't continue forever. When the British Empire collapsed, many of those autonomous kingdoms remained dependent on the foreign policy of Britain. This lasted until the 1980s. It's in the 1980s, under the pressure of the European community, which is now the European Union, that Australia, New Zealand and those other places will still have the British monarch as their head of state also. It's then that they received full sovereignty. I won't say sovereignty, but sovereignty doesn't really exist. It's then that they received the full say about their domestic and international affairs. Okay, till the 1980s. Well, if you ask a common Australian, he would say since 1901 we've been independent from Britain. That's what a common Australian would think. Others were a bit more learned, would say no, since 1946, it's then that there was this pact signed and all the dominions became equal to Britain. But the real separation from British politics happened in the 1980s. And still, because everything had a state, somewhere the British try to push things in their favor. You see this now with Brexit to try to accomplish it, but now it doesn't work anymore because the British Empire is gone. The remainders of it faded away in the 1980s. Now, why am I talking about this? I want you to open your eyes. The Apollonists that rule this world, they learn from Big Brother, and Big Brother learned from his father, the devil. Okay? So when you examine the policies of those Apollonists, you'll see how the enemy works. Because the enemy depends on them. Remember, Satan is broke. He has nothing. He has no quality whatsoever. They need to steal and drain your quality for them to become something. Okay? And in order for that to happen, you need to comply with the theft without realizing you're complying with the theft. So you need to be deceived. Okay? And that's how the world works. It's one big deception run by the Apollonists. And the Apollonists use those blue blood families, we call them royal families, or they are trans elites because those families that are led by transgenders, those are the ones the Apollonists use as the middleman between them and the human population. Well, I hope this video has opened your eyes and inspired you. Keep agreeing with Christ and know who you are.